I've been a school board member, and I always thought the hardest job has to be working for school board members. Because a school board member can say anything at any time, and usually they do. And it doesn't always have to be grounded in what's in law or even what's sort of considered a common decency for what's needed. You know what, I might just stop right now. It's over, okay? Thank you very much. Good night, everybody. I was a school board member during the recession, the Great Recession, and a lot of times things would get said that sounded good in a public sense, but didn't always make sense from a financial position or from the standpoint of what might get implemented. And I may have said some of those things to the people who are here from West Contra Costa who had to live with me those 4 years. I'm sorry. But for me, it was always about what's best for kids, not just giving platitudes to people that sound good in a soundbite. And I took some hard positions as a board member, and it put me in tough spots with other board members, literally. Because the financial challenges we experienced were great. My first night as a school board member, I'd been a city council member first, and I always got chided as a council member that I was spending too much time focusing on youth issues. They said I was being too much of a social worker, and I said, well, that's who I am. And that I didn't want to deal with land use. I wanted to deal with things that would help young people. And so I made the decision to run for the school board after my council term ended. And I was excited on my first night to be sworn in, and no sooner than I put my hand down, they said, now we're going to ask you to vote to close 10 schools. Can I cuss in here? Edgar, can I curse? Dr. Simon, can I? I was like, oh, this is not what I signed up to do. And it was the first realization of how hard this work really is. Everyone says that they love education and kids are our future, but they don't understand how difficult it is to actually implement in an educational space. You all do, because you have to make all of the decisions and the tough decisions. You have to lead, you have to administer, and you have to also balance the needs of elected school board officials and others. And you have to do that with the pressure that comes down from the state, the things that get pushed down. You do that where the constituents are very close to you, right? They say all politics is local, but I've always said that I thought, in my experience as a school board member, I thought it was the hardest elected of all of the jobs that I've had until I got to this one. But it's because the passion is there, the need is there, and unfortunately, sometimes when you're in the chamber, there's no one there when good things are happening, but let it be a conversation about something controversial. Let it be a conversation about school closures, and all of a sudden, everyone's there. And to this day, I can't walk through a grocery store aisle without someone pulling me to the side and saying, hey, can you work on this school issue for me? And I just write it down, and then I call everybody at West Contra Costa or wherever it is, LA, wherever it is that I am. I don't tell the folks, sorry, I don't do that, because this may be the only time that they get access to someone to raise a concern. And so it's the best part of the job for me is to be able to filter the things that I hear from many of you to the leadership in Sacramento, and to try and get policies that reflect your experience about what you need to see at the local level to help students, and to be your advocate, to articulate to the folks who are voting on the policies and the mandates to do two things. One, never give mandates without any funding. I made that commitment after being a school board member, that when you ask schools to do something, you better give them the resources to get it done. And so, hey, I'm gonna stop for real now. I've exceeded my time. That was a commitment I made as a school board member, being asked to close 10 schools, and we were asked to make many hard choices. Someone framed it to me this way, and I'll never forget it. They said, we know it's bad for kids, but we're gonna ask you to do it anyway. I thought that's the worst framing you could ever give on anything. And as a brand new school board member, I basically said, no, I can't do that. But I also understood that just saying no is not enough. that there were real costs for each of those schools, and the district was experiencing significant challenge. And so, because I'd been a city council member in a district that has 5 cities and unincorporated county schools, I went to all those elected officials and said, these are our kids and we need your help. All those political statements that you all are out there making about how these are our kids, well, now we need you. We need you to show up. A few council members chided me and said, hey, that's your lane, not our lane. But nearly every council member said, these are our kids. And they came together with us. We had every city council meet together in one of our school gyms on a Saturday. And those schools, nearly half of those schools remained open because the cities in the district provided money from their budgets and their general funds to keep them open. And it's a great place to put your hands together. That was like a magic trick. No, look, that was an example of me not knowing the answer, but knowing if we can get the right people in the room, we can come up with answers. And we may have to make tough choices. And that's been my experience in this job. Stepping into this job just before the pandemic and then spending all those years in the pandemic, I spent so much time with Edgar and with the folks from CSBA and what was then ACSA. I know they got a new name, they got new branding, with labor and management groups all talking about how we're going to get through this thing and how we're going to move forward together. And I'm grateful for the relationships that have been built in that work with Brooks, who I think is one of the people who is helping to steer so much of the conversation about what happens in education. He may not be in front of the microphone all the time, but you can see his dedication and hard work to supporting the work. And during the pandemic, I would say that there was a coming together of all of the education coalition to really focus on what are the key issues that we have to get through. And I'm grateful for that time. I'm grateful for your leadership. Edgar, thank you. I know he's sick of me because he knows that now when I call him and I ask him his opinion, he knows that I'm going to appoint him to chair some committee and have to do something to implement his opinion. But I've appreciated the ability to call on many of you and to hear from you. I wanted to, that whole school board thing was not part of what I intended to talk about today, but it just rose up in me because I recognize that you all have to make tough decisions every single day that may not be appreciated by those who don't understand what you do and why you have to make some of those tough decisions. And so I just wanted to be in a place of gratitude to each of you as our school leaders, as our administrators, and the things that you do. Let's have a round of applause for all of you. We spend a lot of time, as we should, thanking teachers, and we spend a lot of time thanking classified staff. But I often feel like many go unrecognized for the valiant efforts that you make, and I think that is the case for many administrators, and you're making the tough choices that really matter. And you never stop being an educator, right? You were teachers, you were others in other staff positions, and people sometimes make this distinction. I don't. It takes the entire village to support our children, and we've come through what I believe is the most difficult moment that we may ever experience in our lifetime. And it was daunting to start with, 1 million students without computers. It was daunting to not understand what coronavirus meant and no playbook for how to open schools and close schools. And so we had to do a lot of hard work together, and obviously our students are experiencing the impacts of that. When you look at the rates of mental health challenges and depression, we know that our students may take years to recover academically. And it's really daunting, but at the same time, I'm grateful that we are in a state that provides the resources to be able to move forward. And I'm proud of the work that we've done to secure $8 billion to support learning acceleration and recovery. I'm proud of the work that we've done during the pandemic. How this happened, I do not know, but that we were able to work on the things that I know I've heard in my career, my entire career, that we prioritize. Preschool for every 3- and 4-year-old in a state of California. Yeah, how is it that we're able to do that? How is it that we're able to provide universal meals for every single student in the state? The revenue for after school and expanded learning programs, tremendous things that California is able to do that really no other state is able to do. And so while we have a lot of work to do going forward, we have incredible resources. And I still have hope for what is possible despite the challenges. You know, that we have secured the funding that will allow us to recruit 10,000 mental health clinicians in our state is huge. It's huge. It is huge. By the way, we have a scholarship for anyone who wants to be a mental health clinician, $20,000. If you know someone, have them send me a note. Same for teachers, $20,000 scholarship. teachandca@cde.gov. Call my 1-800 number, 1-800-TONY-THURMOND. No, we've gotten in the recruitment world. I mean, I think you all know that CDE historically has not been directly involved in recruitment. We don't have a single recruiter at the California Department of Education. I know it sounds strange to say that, but we don't. Our staff is set up to do the things that I know you absolutely love, compliance and monitoring. And while that stuff is important, what I keep telling our team is, I want to do the stuff that's aspirational. I want to do the stuff that's ultimately about helping young people achieve. And I'm sure there's a role in that when it comes to compliance and monitoring, but I would bet money that none of you said, I'm going to become an educator because I care about compliance and monitoring. I'm going to bet money that no one in here started your journey that way, or that that's what gets you excited every single day. And if it does, hey, that's cool, right? But that's not what gets me excited every day. What gets me excited every day is a story about hope and overcoming obstacles, because without education, I would not be standing here before you. As many of you know, I grew up on the free lunch program. I was on every public assistance program you can think of. I attended free lunch programs at a time when they gave you an orange ticket to signify you were on the free lunch program. What that did is it put a spotlight on me, and everyone teased me for eating the free lunch. All my friends teased me for eating the free lunch. And then I became an adult, and I realized everyone in my school was on the free lunch program. I didn't understand that. I grew up, I'm the descendant of slaves and immigrants from Panama, from Colombia, from Jamaica, and from Detroit, Michigan, by way of Mississippi. My father, from Detroit, straight into the U.S. Army, into Vietnam, deployed as a young man, and I did not see my father until I found him on the internet just before my 40th birthday. And he talked about trauma. He didn't use that word, but physical, mental scars that prevented him from returning to our family. So my mother, who was a teacher, who taught in San Jose, who was an immigrant from Panama, she raised 4 of us by herself until she couldn't. My mom had cancer. In 1974, I was 6 years old. My mom lost her battle to cancer. And so my siblings and I, we all got split up. Myself and my 5-year-old brother got sent to live in San Jose with a cousin who we never met until we showed up on her doorstep. And she too, an immigrant who worked as a nurse's aide and who was struggling to keep a roof over our heads. And so we relied on public programs. We relied on what was then the food stamps program, now today the EBT card. I was embarrassed to go to the store with the food stamp coupon. They staple the coupon so tightly into the booklet that it has to rip out for you to use it. And every time I ripped that coupon out to buy something, I hung my head because I felt like, boop, you got someone using food stamps on aisle number 7. I don't know why we shame people in this country when we have more resources in this country to feed every hungry person, but I'm grateful that having had those experiences, that today I could sponsor legislation that has now created the guarantee for universal meals in California schools. I don't know what they're going to serve you at lunch today, but growing up in my home, we had a special kind of meal. We had government cheese. Some of you may have had the pleasure. Box of cheese in a block, super thick wrapped plastic. You had to fight to get through that plastic. If you did, it might be the best grilled cheese or quesadilla you ever had. I'm sure hopeful they're not serving you government cheese today. Although the state has some billion pounds of government cheese holed up in a cave somewhere, I don't know what it's intended for, but I sure hope they don't ever have to unleash it. My point is that public programs help my family to overcome poverty. The most important public program in my life was getting an education. And it was as if The teachers were delivering a message that said, your life will be better than it started if you believe in education. It was if they were saying that they were making a promise about what education can mean for someone, even who's overcoming humble beginnings. They didn't use those words. They didn't say, we're making you a promise. They didn't say, your life will be better. But I took that from the actions of the educators who were serving me. And they were right. The promise was kept. And I feel, even in this moment, where we are transitioning from the most difficult things that we've ever had to deal with, that the promise of education is still the same, that we have the ability to overcome humble beginnings and challenges, to provide a first-rate education and a great quality of life for every one of our 6 million students. I still feel hope because of the promise that education can deliver. And even when someone's yelling at you or me or making a threat over some issue, you laugh and you know it's real. The threats are real. The threats are real. I had someone threaten me that they sent a message to the Oakland police Crime Stoppers that they were going to shoot me in my driveway because Tony Thurmond didn't open the schools. You know, that we've reached this level of intensity, right? And I know that someone has said, hey, can you talk about all the political intensity that school districts are facing, right? Our districts should not be attacked for trying to do the right thing by our students, right? There is nothing wrong with talking about the impacts of race and racism and that it has had on so many of our students. There's nothing wrong with talking about the impacts of slavery. But we can also say that when we give students access to things like ethnic studies, we're helping the students who see the contributions of their ancestors, but we're helping all students to be successful. It is research-based and data-proven. And as far as I can tell, there is not a single school district in this state that is teaching critical race theory. That's a political construct that was created to win elections, and it worked. And we're feeling the pressure of it. And so what I'm saying is, I get the attacks that you all often experience. And I think we have to shoulder together to think through how we continue to do the right thing by students who might be bullied because of their skin color or because of their sexual orientation. How do we continue to support our students, but also navigate these conversations that are taking place about parental choice? No one is against a parent's choice or right to have information. But I don't want to see a student who is exploring their sexual orientation and trying to figure out who they are to get threatened or bullied by children or worse, by adults. And I've seen it happen. Adults bullying our children. I've showed up at school board meetings. I've written letters to school board leaders and said, hey, you are violating what's in the law. And we understand that there isn't always clarity here. But I think it's important and incumbent on us to continue to do the right thing by our children and figure out how to navigate these political waters that have come up. Education should not be politics, but it is sadly administered in an environment that is ultra political. I had no idea of this when I decided to run for office. Matter of fact, everyone told me don't run for state superintendent. They said it will destroy your political career. Looking back, I'm thinking now I know why they said all that. But the reality is I left the state legislature where I enjoyed my service there. I was reelected with more than 90% of the vote. I set a record for reelection, but I left the state legislature intentionally because I wanted to work in an environment that was about kids all the time. My politics are about helping young people, and that's what I want my legacy to be. And so I'm glad to have made the decision to become state superintendent. I'm grateful that 5 million people were willing to vote for me and give me the chance to do the job and to give me a chance to come back to do the unfinished work. No one in this room or any of your peers in the state are responsible for what came out of the pandemic. But it gives us a moment of reflection and inflection to think about how do we close gaps? How do we close inequity that existed for many students even before the pandemic? And that inequity is not anyone's fault either, but we have lived in a society that has high rates of poverty and other social issues that impact our students. and allow for us to have an achievement gap. And I believe that we can close that gap. I call it the opportunity gap because I think all students can achieve and can learn. And with the right tools and supports, we can ameliorate some of those social impacts. But we have to start early, and we have to be busy, and we have to be often. That's why, without really understanding what I was saying, I made a pledge that we were going to ensure that every student in this state learns to read by 3rd grade. And I put a deadline on it. And I said, let's do it by 2026. My entire career, I'm 54 years old, my entire career, people have talked about the importance of reading by 3rd grade and what happens when someone doesn't learn to read by 3rd grade. And I've seen it. You know, before I worked in the after schools, before I worked in the juvenile camps teaching life skills, I saw adults who told me that they were in the criminal justice system or some other place because they couldn't learn to read. That's why I'm supporting a bill that would provide universal screening for all of our kids, to screen for dyslexia and for other learning disabilities so that we can have early information. It's why I was proud to support our work to provide $250 million to our schools to have reading coaches who can support our teachers in learning how to read, how they teach students to learn how to read. It's why I'm supporting the work of our Commission on Teacher Credentialing and make sure that all new teachers in their teacher credentialing programs get access to standards that will help them as new teachers to understand what it is and what's important to teach students to read. And we're hoping to get you another $250 million for more reading coaches and specialists to come to your schools. But we have to recruit them, right? We've got to recruit them. We have to recruit coaches, specialists, teachers, classified staff, bus drivers, and food service workers. And so we are facing all these challenges, but we're not alone. Every single state faces a workforce shortage, and including in education. And so it's why we have entered into the world of recruitment in a way that we never have before. Now, we can't do this forever because we don't have a single recruiter. But we've created a public service announcement that talks about the values of becoming a classroom teacher. We are amplifying the availability of a $20,000 scholarship for anyone who wants to become a teacher. We've created a hotline and an email where anyone who wants to become a teacher or get information can do that. We've figured out a way to provide scholarship to undergraduate students who want to become teachers so we can build a pathway. Right now we have 3,000 people working in schools as tutors and mentors through the College Corps program, where we are also working with them to build a bridge for them to enter into teaching programs, to enter into our residency programs, to enter into apprenticeship training programs, for whatever it's going to take to help get them to become part of our next wave of educators. And so we have big work ahead of us, but I still have hope that we can keep the promise of education for California students. That even with those who would politicize education because we talk about issues of racism, because we talk about issues of supporting LGBTQ+ youth, that we cannot let those attacks become barriers to us delivering a quality education for every single student in this state. If someone had made the decision that I was not worthy of someone's extra effort, I wouldn't be here before you. I struggled as a student, and I had teachers who said, you're going to get it. And we're going to stick with you until you do. They were keeping the promise of education, as you are keeping the promise of education for California students. And so my hope is that we continue to shoulder the load together. That if you have ideas about how we manage and ameliorate the politicization of education, we want to hear from you. If you have ideas about what we do to support more recruitment and better training and professional development, I want to hear from you. And I always want to hear from you about what you think we need to do differently in our state budget and the legislation that we pass. And I hope you'll support some of our legislation that you're making your rounds this week. SB 765 is a bill that we sponsored that would allow more retired teachers to return to the classroom without a penalty to their pension. Everyone told me you can't do it, but your members, and I'm not going to say the names because the folks at West Contra Costa know what I'm talking about, they call me every week to tell me I have 4 or 5 teachers out, I don't have any subs, and I have retirees who want to return, but for the fact that they experienced a penalty. And so we wrote and sponsored that bill. And so now that principal who keeps calling me every week is testifying in the committee tomorrow about the bill. My point is there's no shortage of challenges that exist, but there are tremendous opportunities. And I still believe that hope is on our side. and that we can deliver on the promise of education for 6 million students. So call me, text me, send me an email, get me in the grocery store, wherever you have to. Share what you want to share. You know, we're working on a bill to teach personal finance in our schools. And we want your impact on how, input on how to implement a bill like that. So it's not just one more mandate that gets pushed down without resources and without thoughtfulness about how full our curriculum is already. And so we'd love to hear from you about that. And because to me, if we can teach students personal finance, we can help our students prevent debt. But I was amazed, as a student who struggled in algebra, I was amazed to learn you can use financial literacy and personal finance to teach algebra, to teach history, to teach economics. There's so many benefits. And so I'm hopeful that you'll support our bill. I'm going to look to Blake and ask him if he can give me a bill number before we go.
AB 984.
Dang, go Blake. Mr. Blake Johnson, ladies and gentlemen, from our government affairs team. He used his teacher voice. Thank you, Blake. We hope that you will not only support the bill, but that you will give us your input about how a bill requirement like that to teach personal finance should be implemented so that it is not something that we just push down from the state level, but rather we do together in unison to support our students. So once again, let me end as I started, in gratitude for what you do for California students. And I know you don't often hear it, so I hope it means something, and I'm happy to say it. Thank you for what you do. Gracias por todo. And I'm saying thank you now, and thank you in advance for the great work that I know we'll do together to keep the promise of California education. Thank you so much, and have a great day.